Hi, guys. Welcome to Coffee Conversations. You see, I've got a big cup this morning. It's been that kind of week. If you're new here, thank you for joining us. I'm glad you found your way in. I'm trying to build this community around the Love Lounge and being her and learn to love. So, thank you for showing up, not only for the conversation, but to me, that means you're showing up for yourself. So, Coffee Conversations is one of the things that I enjoy doing most because I just get to have a true just conversation with people. It's not a course or it's not a teaching. It's just something that I've had on my mind. So recently I heard a statement made, and I sat with that statement for a while, and I thought, wow, I've never thought of that way. And so I think it exposed me to something that I've never been asked directly or had to think about directly. We spend a lot of time looking for someone we can build our life with, and we look for someone stable, someone compatible, someone we can tolerate on a Tuesday when nothing romantic is happening. And there's nothing wrong with that because we all know that compatibility matters. But this was the question or the statement that was made that had me thinking, and is the focus and topic of today's coffee conversation. Are you looking for that someone you can live with? Or are you looking or holding out for that person you simply cannot live without? Think about that. Those are not the same people, and that is not the same search. And if we keep running into what we call the wrong one, it may explain a lot about why you found that a relationship that you're in fits you, but it doesn't fulfill you. So, what would be the difference? So, let me paint two pictures for you. The can live with relationship, looks perfectly fine. He's a good man. He shows up. He's responsible. He doesn't cause any drama or extra drama or add any extra drama to your life. You don't fight a lot. Things are manageable, stable, predictable. But yet, there's something in you that is quiet, but it isn't peace. All right. You're not unhappy enough to leave, but you're not full enough to feel like this is it. I've arrived in that relationship. You're tolerating a good situation, but it doesn't fit who you actually are. Now, the can't live without relationship, and I want to be clear about this. I don't mean here, I'm not talking about desperation. I'm not talking about chasing a guy who's cheating on you over and over again or abusive to you in some way. I'm not talking about that kind of addiction or that kind of trauma bond that feels like love because the highs are so high that it makes you forget the lows. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something more quieter and more real than that. The person you can't live without is the person whose presence, in your presence, you are most yourself, not most comfortable, but the most honest version of you. Uh, that person doesn't require you to shrink or perform or manage. The one that sees those parts of you that are not perfect or inconvenient, and it's okay with them. Not in a more not in a way that adds more drama to either of your lives, but that adds depth. That to me, I think is rare. And that to me is the primary goal of that statement. The can live with person or relationship, or the person you can't live without. So, in my teachings, especially in our private school community, that's SKOOL, I talk about emotional intelligence, and that's where I draw a lot of things from for my teachings. That's where I focus on my clients in my law firm. We talk about emotional intelligence and use that a lot. So, emotional intelligence research draws a distinction between emotional comfort and emotional recognition. And so, comfort means, you've got someone who doesn't disturb your peace, Recognition means, though, that the person actually sees you. They see your full emotional landscape, not just those things that are presentable. Many women, I think, spend years in relationships built in comfort, having never experienced being fully recognized. And the body knows the difference. Even when your mind is trying to tell you to rationalize all those things away, I believe recognition activates a different kind of connection between people. And it's rooted in actually being known, not just accommodated. So if you can't, if the relationship we're supposed to be going for is the one we can't live without, why do we stay or end up in can live with relationships? And I want to give you three reasons, the three reasons I believe. Reason number one, we're taught to be grateful for good enough. Somewhere along the way, our family, culture, through past disappointments, many of us just absorb the belief that wanting more is either selfish or we put ourselves in a dangerous situation. And that holding out for that type of depth that recognition has for us tends to be selfish. That a good man who treats you decently is secure, and that is enough. So we stop asking the deeper questions, looking deeper at a person, looking for a more deeper connection with someone. We stop listening to that quiet in us that knows something is missing. We call it maturity, growing up. It's the stable thing, it's a predictable thing, but actually, what it is self abandonment. You have to know your role of self worth when you're selecting your partner. That means you're self aware. You know your own emotional landscape, your values, and your needs. And so, research on attachment shows that attachment and partner selection consistently show that our beliefs about who we deserve in our lives shapes who we choose. Women with higher emotional self worth don't just look for partners who treat them well, they look for partners who genuinely see them. And that distinction can change everything about who ends up on your short list. Reason number two, we confuse intensity with depth and recognition. What does that mean? There are many of us who've experienced relationships that burn, that are electric. They consume us. It is completely disorienting. And because of that feeling, we've taken that feeling and we said, "Oh, that must be that intensity. That's what I can't live without." But that's not depth. And when you get burned by that intense relationship, then it's left a bad taste in your mouth. It causes you tremendous pain. And then you decide that that intensity or what you think is depth was dangerous for you and not good for you. And that the feeling of not being able to live without someone is a red flag. However, it should be a compass. You choose steadier, you choose safer, and someone you can live with because the alternative felt like you were losing yourself again. And here's what I want you to hear: we do have a protective instinct, and we should. And protecting yourself, however, shouldn't mean always building walls. That protection is not the same as fulfillment, and a relationship built entirely on safety can still leave you starving for something you can't name. And let me make this clear: I'm not talking about safety as in physical abuse, those kinds of things. I want you to understand, once again, that can't live without feeling this is not the one that is trauma bond based. This is not the one that is based on emotions that you have not sat with. If you are a part of my community, you're aware of the HER code, HER code, and I teach you to hold before you react. You evaluate what you know, and then you respond with clarity. Now, let's apply that to attraction. Before dismissing a feeling as too intense, you need to evaluate whether that intensity is rooted in anxiety or stress, which is a trauma bond sign. That is your red flag. Or in a genuine recognition, which is a depth sign. Anxiety or a trauma bond sign would produce urgency, fear of abandonment, inconsistency. But recognition, which is your depth sign, produces presence, steadiness, and the feeling of being seen, even in conflict. So your emotional intelligence should tell you the difference, but only if you slow down long enough to listen to it and assess it. Reason number three, we don't believe she. We don't believe being her, the version of us who deserves the can't live without. We don't think that that person is actually available to us. And this is the one that we need to sit with most. We don't say it out loud, but somewhere underneath everything, all of our layers, and the I'm just being realistic, there's a woman who isn't sure that she is the kind of person someone couldn't live without. And so she doesn't look for it because looking for it requires believing you're worth finding. This is where I want to bring in the work that we do, because emotional intelligence is not just about managing your emotions or managing emotions in a conflict. It's about knowing yourself clearly enough to know what you actually need. And the can't live without is not the about need in the desperate sense. I cannot emphasize that enough. It is about alignment with a person. It is about finding someone whose presence in your life makes you more yourself, not less. The first domain of emotional intelligence we said earlier is self awareness. And that's the ability of you to recognize your emotions, your values, and your patterns in real time. In context of relationships, self awareness is what allows you to distinguish between what you want, what you've been taught or told to want, and what you actually need. And without it, we often mistake a habit for love or a comfort for connection or familiarity as fulfillment. Developing your self awareness is not selfish, it is required for any relationship that actually holds you. Here is what seeking a partner looks like if you're seeking an emotionally intelligent partner. So if you're going down that checklist and you're really sitting with the emotions, not making rash decisions, you sit in these questions and you ask them and you answer them. So, question number one, in this person's presence, am I more myself or am I managing myself? Next, do I feel emotionally recognized here or just emotionally accommodated? Next, is the peace that I feel in this relationship the peace of being held or the peace of not being disturbed? It's a huge difference. The next question, when I imagine my life without this person, do I feel relief, grief, or a complicated mixture of both? And one of the final questions, does this relationship ask me to grow? Does it push me to grow? Or is it only maintaining? Now, these questions aren't designated to create doubt in like a current relationship or anything like that. They're just designed to help you pull out some truths within yourself when you're starting to find or select a partner, and not just a partner. These are questions that we can ask when we're having relationships with people we call friends as well. Those that emotional intelligence data, that is data. Remember, what we teach in our school and our private community is being her means that you're honest with yourself about your own emotional experiences. Even when, no, especially when the honest answers require something of us. That is what being her is about. And remember, going back to emotion is data. So we have to take that and just wipe the noise from the emotion. Not every feeling is a signal of something. Some feelings are old wounds that are talking and coming back to us. Some of them are fear. Some are the echo of what we were told we should want, what we should do, what we should feel. Remember, the her code teaches us to evaluate before we act, which means sitting with those feelings long enough to ask, is that emotion giving me accurate information, accurate data about my present situation? What is my present reality? Or is that emotion replaying a past experience or a past feeling? That answer can change everything about how you then make the decision for what you have to make. I want to close with something important. This conversation is not a verdict on your current relationship. It's not a directive like leave, stay, go evaluate. You don't have to do any of that if you don't want to. It's just a conversation. It's something to think about. It's something to help open you up, increase your emotional intelligence so that then you become her, right? You're being her. You are allowed to want more than a relationship you can survive. You are allowed to hold out for a relationship that makes you come alive. That is not selfish. It is not unrealistic. And a woman who knows her own value clearly enough to refuse to negotiate that away deserves it. Being her means you bring that woman into your relationships, not the one who settles because it feels safe. The one who chooses from a place of clarity because she knows who she is, what she needs, and what she's no longer willing to just stand for. Emotional intelligence isn't only about recognizing and managing feelings. At its highest level, it requires emotional courage, the willingness to feel something difficult and hold it in honesty and act in alignment with your values, even when there's an easier path. And choosing the relationship you can't live without over the relationship you can tolerate requires emotional courage. So, does staying in a relationship and choosing it consciously, either direction, clarity requires courage, and courage is a skill. So, here are the takeaways from the conversation today, right? The person you can't live without is not defined by chemistry alone. We've said that over and over again. She is found when your self awareness is clear enough to recognize depth without confusing it with drama. Settling for livable is always a choice, and it is reversible if you're honest with yourself. And emotional intelligence is the ability to know what you feel, evaluate what is true, and respond with clarity. And it is the most powerful tool that you have for choosing well in life. So I want to thank you for being here today. Thank you for showing up for the conversation. I hope you enjoy the conversation, but more importantly, once again, thank you for showing up for yourself. If you're interested in more conversations like this, more support in regards to being her, you can feel free to join us in our private school community, the Love Lounge. It is LOVE Lounge, and it exists exactly for this purpose. And we'll see you next conversation.